Well, let's talk about pie charts. So I learned them as pie charts. I later learned them as circle graphs, but we're going to take some data and put it in the form of a circle that's sectioned off and it ends up looking like a pie. So we'll call it a pie chart. We do this again with data that is qualitative or categorical. And what that means is it's not data that we would do math with. It just labels things or puts them into categories. And here what we're looking at is the 16 schools that make up the Big 12 conference, and then their main school color, which I've placed into a simpler category of color. So blue, red, even though there are different forms of blue and different forms of red. And I want to know how many schools use each color as their main color. So when we looked at this with the bar graph, if you looked at that one, we kept each color separate. Okay, orange, gold, black, and green, even though they each had a frequency of 1, we kept those separate and we ended up with that bar graph. Now what I'm going to do is lump those into a category called other. And so there are 3 schools that have blue, 7 with red as their primary color, purple has 2, and then 4 schools that have other. Okay, so that's all we need for our data here. We're going to now use our simplified data, and we are going to make this chart, and then we're going to turn it into a circle graph. But in order to do that, we need a circle. So let's see, where did my circle maker go? It was very fancy. Well, here, this will do. All you need to do is pull out your old Independence Day soundtrack on CD, and you're going to trace the circle around. But before I do that, I'm actually going to mark where the center of that circle is. That's important too. Now, ideally, what you would do is pull out a compass. I have one. I just wanted to show you a different method of making this and show off my excellent taste in music, of course. Okay, now what we're going to do is fill out this chart up here and eventually section this off. But in order to do that, we need to know what percent of the circle each color gets. And then we need to turn that percent into degrees, and then we need to pull out our compass and use a protractor to fill out our circle. Here, let's get to it. In order to turn these into a percent, we need to know what the total frequency is. How many schools are we looking at here? Okay, so for instance, the three schools that use blue are actually 3 out of 16. And so to calculate this, we will take part divided by whole times 100%. Okay, so 3 divided by 16, I'll write this out once. 3 divided by 16 times 100%. And then, we could do this by hand. I expect us to be able to do 3 divided by 16 by hand. But we'll go ahead and allow the calculator to help us out on this one. So let's see if we can see this. 3 divided by 16 gives us 0.1875, and when we multiply that by 100, we get 18.75. Okay, so we'll write that down there. 18.75%. And then if we keep going down the list doing that, 7 divided by 16 times 100, and then 2 divided by 16 times 100, we get the next 2 values. So they would be 43.75 and then 12.5. And then notice on our last one, we go from 2 schools to 4 schools. So we can just double this to be 25%. And it's probably worth noting that, 1 divided by 16 times 100 is 6.25. You can't see that. 6.25. So for each single frequency, it's 6.25. We multiply it by 3 here, by 7 here, on and on. Okay, when we add all these up, it should add up to 100%. Sometimes when you round, we get a little off of this, like 100.1 or 99.9, and that's okay. But if it's more than that, double check your work because maybe we did something wrong. All right, well, that helps us, but, and we'll actually use these as labels here, but for degrees, we need to know what portion of the circle 18.75 is. Now, we have to think, how many degrees are there total in a circle? Okay, so there are 360 degrees total. And so to calculate our last column here, what we're going to do is just take the percent times 360 degrees. And that will tell us how many degrees total for each section. So again, something we should be able to do by hand, but just to spare us a little time here, we'll take, let me bring that up, 18.75 times 360. Now notice that gives us 6,750. That's way too much, right? Well, that's because when we do any math with our percents, we need to turn it back into its decimal form. So percent as decimal, which basically means divide it back by 100. Okay, so that number really becomes 67.5 degrees. All right. Similarly, we'll take this 43.75% and think of it as 0.4375 times 360, and we get 157.5 degrees. All right, we'll do one more. So 12.5, but we'll divide that by 100, so it's 0.125 times 360 gives us 45 degrees. And then when we double that, we get 90 degrees here. All right, now if we add all of these together, we should see that we get 360 degrees. Again, sometimes there's a little bit of rounding error there. But how do we go and measure these things now? Well, first of all, you have to decide what order we want to list these in. Sometimes you go largest to smallest. Sometimes it's alphabetical. Sometimes there's no order to it at all. I usually like there to be some kind of order to it. But generally what we'll do, we need a starting line segment in here, okay? So we need to measure angles, but in order to do that, we need a line to start. I usually go up to the top. But then from there, let's say we wanted to start with red since it's our largest degree. Okay, what I'm going to do is rotate my paper here, and I'm going to line up my protractor so that my center of my circle, which is why I wanted that there, is lined up. I'll zoom in just a little bit. And then, I don't know who Kibby was, but this apparently was that person's protractor. Okay, our angle was 157.5. So I'm going to go along the outside to 157.5, and I'm going to be as exact as I can, but it's an imperfect measurement, right? Let's see. I'll show that one more time in case I was off camera. I forgot to look. But we'll go all the way around to 157.5. I got a little off center there. And looks like it would be about there. Again, I think I'm a little off from where I was before. So we won't worry about it too much. But right about there. And then I'll put a point and I'll draw my line segment. Now, before I move on too much further, I might want to label that section right away. So let me zoom back out for a sec. And that portion of the circle was red. Okay, so I'm going to put in there red, and I'm going to put in the percent. Notice that 43.75 is a little less than 50%, which would be half the circle. And so is our segment here. All right, now the next biggest one is blue, 67.5. So now I'm going to build off of this line segment. So I'm going to come down here and rotate my paper again. And then I'm going to go this time along the outside again until I get to 67.5, which is about there. And I'll draw a dot, and there's my next section. Okay, so I will label that blue, and then put in the percent as well. Percent was 18.75%. Generally, when we think pie charts, we think percents. It wouldn't really be helpful to the average reader to put in the degrees there. We're just doing that to help us make our chart. Okay, now I know I went 67.5 before 90. That wasn't intentional, but now that I'm thinking of it, maybe I'll just leave other until the very end. So let's look at purple next. Purple was 45 degrees. And so again, I'll line up the protractor here, come up to 45 degrees, and draw in my line segment there. Okay. And that was purple. So I've got my three kind of meaningful colors here. I'll label the percent 12.5. And then I'll worry about what's left because I only have one more group. Now it's 90 degrees. I should not have to draw anymore. And if you look at that segment that's left, you can see it does look like a 90-degree segment of a circle. So, again, I just said we wouldn't put the degrees in there. I was just saying it out loud. Other 25%. Okay, so there's our pie chart. Now, we still need a couple of things. We need a title, and we can title this kind of what we did with our bar graph as well. Main color usage by schools in the Big 12 or something like that, by Big 12 schools. Okay. And then there's something else that I like to include on circle graphs. Okay, there's not much else to label except we can talk about the number of schools that we have. Okay, so there were 16, and sometimes at the bottom of these you'll see n equals 16 or number of participants or schools or something like that. And that's helpful information too. But you can see there's a lot that goes into making a pie chart as far as calculations go, and a lot of work if you're doing these by hand. And I do encourage you to have your students, if you're in that age range, make these by hand, even though there are plenty of programs to help us do it, quicker electronically. Get them understanding the relationship between percent, portions of objects like circles. You get to teach degrees, and you get to teach meaningful representation of data. So hopefully that's helpful.